Hi, it's Carol from bookreporter.com, and I'm here with a very special Book Reporter Talks to interview with Jessie Kornbluth, who, besides being the author of JFK and Mary Meyer, is also the co-founder of Book Reporter with me. So this is going to be a really fun conversation because we're going to go down memory lane as well as talk about this book.
You and I have been talking for 23 years.
Actually, I think it's more like 25.
It's probably. I say this is the most successful relationship I've had with a woman in my entire life.
And I'm it. Well, I tell you, we should go back. We first worked together when I was at Mademoiselle magazine, and we made documentaries together. And Jessie would be the interviewer, and I would be the executive producer. We had great fun doing those.
Everyone said, Carol is really tough. And then they said something else about her. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, she's really easy. All you have to do is get it right.
That's exactly. It was very, very simple, and just people didn't understand that. And get it in on time. That was my other thing. Get it in on time. So when I left Condé Nast and I was trying to decide what to be when I grew up, Jessie and Murray approached me, who had worked on the films with me, and said, how about if we do videos in Barnes & Noble bookstores with author interviews and conversations? So take it away. We went and we met with them.
This is an amazingly good idea. I mean, it was a money idea. We were going to make videos, show them on monitors,
yes,
on a table near the checkout.
And in the cafes, because the cafes had just opened, and we felt like the cafes, people were sitting there, and we felt that if you watched the author and fell in love with them, you'd go buy his books, and that would be it.
Right, but this was at a time, remember, when Prodigy was a big deal.
Right.
CompuServe and AOL had maybe 1.5 million members.
Right.
And there was, the dial-up, and it cost you $1 million. It was the dark ages.
It was so rudimentary, but we were seeing that connecting readers with authors, which is what we're now doing amusingly on the Book Reporter Talks to interviews.
Where readers meet writers.
Where readers meet writers. Where readers meet writers. And it was, what we just saw was if you hear an author speak and you hear them speaking about their book, it's a completely different experience than just reading review or being told. So we go and we meet with them, and the questions that are posed to us.
First I think we made the sample first.
Yes, we made a fabulous
Peter Mail's talking dog, Dr. Gallo, holding up 5 pounds of fat. You can wear Italian or you can eat Italian.
Exactly.
And a thriller writer.
Yeah. A
female thriller writer. So we had, gender neutral, everything. We had everything right in its place.
And we would be delivering these every month. And we would have, we would be figuring out who the great content would be. Because remember, it was content. Content was always the big word. And the questions that we were asked when we got there were, I'll start with, who will turn the TV on and off? Then it was, who's going to deliver the tape? It's like there were every question.
Maybe we'll project it on a wall in the basement.
Yeah, something along those lines. And you do realize it needs to be tan and green because those are our colors. So whatever you're designing, that's what it has to be. So we were thinking nothing about the delivery process. We were really stuck on the content and who we were going to be interviewing and who we were going to be talking to.
Yeah, we actually thought they were competent to run their business. It turned out they weren't. And I found this out. Well, then Carol and I went to AOL. We got this deal.
Right.
For just enough money to keep us in business for 6 months and then fail.
Right, exactly. And that was exactly what was going to happen.
Because there was no such thing as advertising. But then there was a god.
Right.
John Grisham.
Yes.
We were asked if we would like, because there were no other book sites, to interview him. He never gave interviews.
He also had never done, of course, an online interview. Nothing like that.
And he was wonderful.
Right.
And then...
And wait, we also had the first ever excerpt from book from John Grisham. So this is February 1997. So now we've got the interview and we have the... we have both the interview and the excerpt.
And
we've
the
got
bi-link.
both.
And then I go to AOL... And they're in the middle of an access crisis where people can't log on. And we brutalize them. And they don't know what they're doing anyway. So they give us 80 hours of main screen promotion. And on the first day of launch, there were 75 to 80,000 hits in a service that had about 2 million. You could fill Yankee Stadium with Grisham fans on AOL that day.
Great.
And then something else happened. Bob Pittman said, this is a tech company. It wants to be a media company. Jesse, why don't you come down and be our editorial director? And I couldn't not do it.
Right.
I mean, I didn't want to do it because I didn't think they were going anywhere. And also I was really committed to what Carol and I were doing. But there was a thing that Carol's very nice not to point out, which is I have fairly high-end taste.
He does.
And if I had stayed, we really would have been out of business in 6 months. Jodi Picoult, I have no idea who that was.
Right, right.
All these people.
Nothing commercial.
Carol actually reads them and knows them, and to her credit, likes them, sees what's good about them, and that's who's out there online reading books.
Reading books. Well, it was also very funny because our office was on 57th Street because Jesse was living on the Upper West Side at the time, and he didn't want to go any further south than 57th Street. So he moves down to AOL in Washington, D.C., and he says, I would call him in the morning and say, and so where's that office? Oh, is that south of 57th Street? As I was driving in from New Jersey to 57th Street every morning to run the company.
And I got in trouble because all the book promotions that were good were Carol's, and there was this other really dweeby site, and they complained that I was unfair to them. And I said, give me the stuff.
Give me the stuff. Give me the stuff. And it was a very different time because you were trying to get authors that would be typing online. There was no such thing as video. Any little piece of art that was showing up, remember we had to do download on demand, we'd have to submit the art the day before. So we need to know that we were going to show a picture of this book tomorrow. So we'd have to have the art submitted so that it could be all in the system and ready to go out to the readers. So it was a totally different time, a totally different place. But by the same token, we were still talking to readers and just trying to embrace them. We started a chat room. We started message boards.
Bookachino,
the chat room. Jesse and I would have somebody else be in the chat room all the time. Either that people would think we were sexting each other because it was the crazy days of AOL. So we'd always have someone else. And then we'd recruited a number of these people that went on to become our chat hosts and our reviewers.
Yes, our basic motto was Tom Sawyer painting the fence.
Exactly.
This is fun. How would you like to come and do this for free? Later, Ariana Huffington made a business out of this.
Exactly. But it was always finding, what was interesting though is right from the beginning, we found books that we never would have known about. I remember we had a chat room that was dedicated to The Sparrow. And there were a whole group of people that always wanted to go in and speak about this book. We learned about Janet Ivanovich, many commercial authors that we did not know anything about, that people were just crazy about going in to talk about. And it widened our horizons as well.
Well, and this is really the point. This is where I do the commercial for Carol. Carol knows more about this business than the people who are in the business. And at this point, of the many things that the Book Report Network does, telling publishers what to do is not the least activity.
Well, you know what it is? I like to see what readers want. And a lot of times I read reader mail all the time. I'm constantly reading reader mail to see what they're interested in, to see what guides they're looking for, what book clubs are talking about, because I feel that by the connection with the reader, we do a huge service because we're able to figure out, did you really love this book? What did you love about this book? What did you take away from it? And I think there's a thing about a book being sold, but there's a thing about what it appealed to the person. And that's the thing that matters to me. What made me want to pick it up?
One of the best things we did was when people came in the morning, the first half hour, we answered the mail.
Yes.
Every piece of mail got answered.
Yes.
I still do this on the website I do now. And people are stunned, like, is this you or is this one of your staff? No, it's...
Yeah, and I still, now my answer when a newsletter goes out on Friday night because I usually can't fall asleep right away because I'm still in high gear. And I'll answer somebody back and they're like, do you sleep? And I'm like, yes, but I also want to answer your note because that was an easy question. It wasn't a hard one. It wasn't a hard one to do. And I think that we built so many relationships along the way, and that's what became really fun. So when you went on to do Head Butler, which is a daily newsletter 4 days a week, where you talk about...
It's a site.
A site.
Promoted by a newsletter. I don't even like being called a blog, because a blog is something you think a guy in pajamas did and types out quickly and in the basement.
But you're dressed like this.
No. No, but... I'm a recovering journalist, so I write more than one draft. I edit it. It's an actual polished little thing. It reads like a letter to you, but as you know, there is nothing more difficult than writing a little personal thing, something that looks like it's designed for one reader.
One reader, one person. You know, when we first started out, we would write everything to each other in email, like write all our articles in email, because then you were really only talking to one reader. And by writing, actually I still do this, the newsletter in an email every single week, I really feel like I'm reaching out, and there's certain people I'm thinking about as I'm writing it. Because actually, that's the one-to-one connection, as opposed to just writing for the masses. There's a difference between doing that and writing for a newspaper going to everybody. You're thinking of who your audience is.
Yeah, I don't miss journalism.
You don't. And you spent how many years writing for Vanity Fair and New York Magazine?
I was a journalist for 40 years.
40 years.
And I occasionally I do something now and I think, oh God, this is so much fun.
Right.
But of course, once I was one of the highest paid journalists in the world, and to do the same piece for no money, it lacks a thrill.
Yeah, it lacks that same kind of. But also, when you were at Vanity Fair, was that during the Tina Brown days, when there was excitement surrounding what was going on? There was excitement and stories.
I put a sign once outside of our office. On the side, we put out a magazine.
Right.
I mean, there was gossip, and there was luxury travel, and people FedExed their luggage. Mm-hmm. I took the Concorde to lunch in England.
Mm-hmm. It's a totally different time.
That's all gone.
Yeah, the go-go 90s. It was the go-go 90s but it was also when celebrity culture was different from what it is now. I mean, I remember when I was at the magazine, there was a time where everything was supermodels, and it was and now a celebrity is a completely different thing than it was then. I mean, you would be trying to get an interview with somebody. Now there are a million people you can interview.
I never did an interview where that had a publicist present.
Right, right.
And now it's basically controlled.
Deborah Gork, yeah. It's like, what are you going to talk about?
It's very hard to get an honest exchange.
Mm-hmm. To get those honest conversations.
So this is the medium, and the sort of thing we're doing now is, it looks informal, but of course we've rehearsed it and written the script.
We've totally written this in advance.
But it feels real. It is real.
It feels real, and that's the reason I've started to do these long-form interviews, because I also feel that everything right now is bits and bytes. You see a quick tab about, this is what this book is about, this is what it's about, but I really want to get into the writing process. I want to get into why the author did this. I want to get into everything from a design on a book. Yesterday I was talking to somebody, and we talked about the chapter designs inside the book, just the little chapter heads, and why they were the way they were. And I find that those are little tidbits that everybody can't go to an author event. So the goal is to kind of bring the author event to them now, which means let's talk about JFK and Mrs. Meyer, Mary Meyer,
Sure. Not a book I intended to write. I mean, I'm writing things I didn't intend to write because there are stories I find that are hidden in plain sight. A few years ago, I wrote a play about Matisse and the chapel in Valence, France. It's not a secret that at the end of his life, he built this chapel in honor of a nun who had been his nurse in another city. And it was the masterpiece of his life, and he died happy in his own bed, loved and beloved. And I wrote this play.
Right.
Again, 70% of it was from books. The dialogue came from books. Mary Meyer, same story. Mary Meyer Jack Kennedy slept with everybody. That was his obsession, that was his addiction. But from 1962 to his assassination, he actually did have one serious lover. I mean, he cheated on her all the time, but she was a very old friend, this Mary Pinchot Meyer woman. And she was the sister of Ben Bradley's wife. And she lived on Park Avenue, she went to Brearley, Vassar, she was an elite person. She knew Jack from 1936 as a friend. And she was very much like Jackie, but the difference was she was interested in politics, and she was sexy. Jackie was not a sexual being, a sensual being in any way. And Jack married her for very practical reasons. I mean, he proposed by telegram. And
not know that.
A cute factoid about the Kennedys is there are only two presidents in the 20th century who have not had shared bedrooms with their wives. The Trumps and the Kennedys. And I mean, and Jack was just a dog. He took the virginity of a 19-year-old virgin, an intern, on his wife's bed on the 4th day of her internship.
Okay.
And she traveled with him for a year. He never kissed her. Never. I mean, maybe he knew her name, but that was unusual. But Mary was serious, and it was about much more than sex. And she was invited to be in the Oval Office during the day and just sit there and read, do whatever, because he valued her input. And this is a guy who didn't have a single woman in the cabinet and was a misogynist. So she was an important person in his life. And he fantasized about divorcing Jackie and marrying her after the '64 election.
Wow.
And then he was killed. Mary had been married to one of the heads of the CIA, and she did not believe for 1 second that Lee Oswald did this alone with the magic bullet. And she was extremely mouthy. And 10 months after Kennedy was killed, she was taking her daily walk on the towpath along the canal in Georgetown, and she took a bullet to the head and a bullet to the chest and died. Her friend called Ben Bradley and said, Mary had a diary, get it. So the Bradleys rush around the corner, and there they find one of the heads of the CIA with a bolt cutter. They get in and they find what they describe as an art notebook with lots of sketches and 10 cryptic references to an unknown lover who they immediately understand is Jack Kennedy. The diary goes back and forth, CIA, Bradleys, and they burn it.
The Bradleys burn it.
The Bradleys burn it.
Okay.
So this is a footnote in other books. Mary Meyer, footnote, presidential mistress, killed a small African-American man, was arrested and tried and found innocent, who killed Mary Meyer. So I didn't care so much about that. I thought, well, again, hidden in plain sight. There's a diary to be written. So you start looking at JFK books. There are 40,000 JFK books and God knows how many sites, and it's one rabbit hole after the other. But I knew what to look at. I read 150 books, I did the relevant research, and I had a timeline that I could look at her life against the events of the White House that she went to, against the policy that she talked to Kennedy about, and he actually changed his views as a result of conversations with her. She was an important advisor. The diary wasn't that hard to write. I also could channel her because I knew girls. I went to a boarding school. I knew girls who were like the young Mary Pinchot. And I knew their mothers, the women who poured tea in the gym on Saturdays after games, who I all had wicked crushes on, who were like the grown-up Mary Meyer.
The grown-up women. They
Yeah.
became, the girls became those women.
And they became their mothers, yes, very much. And then I knew CIA people in Washington. My brother was the mentor of one of Mary Meyer's children at prep school for a year. When Kennedy died, I walked Sandy Spaulding, the son of one of the Kennedy's best friends, around for 3 hours. A few days later, I was the guy on top of the chapel who played taps while the whole school cried beneath. And, so I have just enough of a link
Frame of reference.
to their world. And so it wasn't the hardest book I ever wrote. It was like destined. I'd show up every day and Mary would tell me what to do.
And what you were doing, though, is you were actually framing this against actual history. This is actually what happened this dinner at the White House that night, what she wore, what Jackie wore. You have the records of all that, which
right,
is
and she
so
comments on those things. But, as I say, there are 4 characters in this book, Jack, Jackie, Mary, and the footnotes. There are lots of footnotes, and I am the footnotes. That's my voice, because I knew things that they couldn't have known while they were alive. And I knew things that were true about certain people, like Ben Bradley was a CIA asset all his life. And people think Ben Bradley is Jason Robards.
Right.
He's not. He is not. Ben Bradley was a friend of Jack's. A close friend, he thought, and Jack thought, but really was very transactional. The Kennedys told him what they wanted him to know, and he carried the ball. And he always felt he was getting scoops. But really, he was being used. But he had the only access that anyone had. They were 2 elegant guys. And Jackie said, oh, Jack's female ideal is Toni Bradley, Ben's wife.
That's why.
So it was a very small world back then. I mean, Georgetown was like a mile round, and anybody lived there, and they went to all the same parties. It was remarkable. And the Kennedys watched Jackie's TV tour on a set that was 13 inches with rabbit ears.
Wow. Wow.
That they had so Jack could watch the occasional football game and so the kids could watch cartoons. That's the White House in 1961.
Right. Probably, was it color? No. Probably
No,
black and white.
no.
Right? It's all black. It's a totally different world.
So
it's like Hollywood was a small town and Washington was a small town.
So there are a couple of things that I never really thought about, like who killed Jack Kennedy, because she had some suspicions and those were fine, but I didn't need to get into that. And then who killed Mary Meyer? And of course, I paid no attention to that because I was writing her diary. Mm-hmm. It ended 2 days before she died. Mm-hmm. I thought, oh, that's so, let me stay away from that because there are books about who killed Mary Meyer. Mm-hmm. And then I read the book and I saw what she thought and I thought, oh my God, it wasn't the little black man. It very likely was the jogger who was the witness who 4 decades later was revealed to be a CIA guy. Mm-hmm. And the idea that a civilian woman could be hit
because of what
in
she
broad
knew.
daylight because of what she knew or suspected. And, you know, it's wrong in The Irishman and cheap and sleazy like the movie JFK to say, well, if they can kill the president, get away with it, they can kill a union guy. As a journalist, I don't feel comfortable going that far. But there's just so much we don't know. Mm-hmm. And the book raises these questions, but really it's intended to be, it's like a play because it's all dialogue.
It is. It's a brisk read. And it's a brisk read because you're just inside this person's life and you get inside her head as you're reading the book. Because she's having her questions, she's having her doubts, she's wondering what's going on. She's wondering about her role. I mean, she is wondering about her role, but at the same time, she's loving her role. Am I right?
She tried not to be in love with him mm-hmm. because she knew how badly damaged he was. And at the same time, she knew she was his last hope of having a human relationship. And he couldn't do it.
He couldn't do it.
That's the real background of the book, is this immense sadness of how broken and lonely Kennedy was. Because we don't see him that way. Mm. We see, you know, the great appearances and the speeches and the wit and how cute he was. And then we see Jackie with the facade of Camelot. Mm-hmm.
2 young children, the child under the desk, the child
exactly
running to the plane, running to the helicopter, all these scenarios, snippets.
And the scenarios are much more attractive than the reality. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, Kennedy did want to kill Castro. And then he blamed it on the CIA, which took it badly. And mm-hmm. therefore, you could say, oh, the CIA was involved in his assassination in the following ways. I mean, you can go down your own rabbit hole, which is much more fun, I find, than going down someone else's.
And especially since all these years later, we still have no idea what really happened. We think.
Well, the Kennedy assassination is, in fact, the pivotal historical event of our lives, mm-hmm. because 70% of the American people didn't believe the official story then, and they don't believe it now. And now, we don't believe anything, because mm-hmm. we assume the government is lying. Mm-hmm. But it all starts here.
It all starts back then.
And she's a witness to a lot of it. And I hate to have gender bias because even though I'm favorable to women, I think she saw more clearly than the guys. The guys came from business and they had corporate mentalities.
And power. Power was a big motivator.
At one point she says, Jack, who says no to you? Mm-hmm. And he says, everybody, all day, every day. She said, you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And he says, women who voted for me tend to want to serve their president. Mm-hmm. And she says, and not just them. He said, I don't know, I never ask. Well, what do you do, Jack? I request. Mm-hmm. She says, like now? He said, no, Mary, not like now. And she says, well, why am I here? I'm 42 years old. I'm too old for you. Jackie's not here. What is this about? And he says, I trust you, Mary. I want you to be my beacon light. Mm-hmm. And he's close to tears. Now, did that scene happen? Of course it did not happen.
Sounded really like it happened, though.
But it sounds true. Mm-hmm. There's a scene 3 months after the assassination, a snowy day. Mary's walking on the towpath a figure in a camel hair coat comes toward her. It's Jackie. Now this happened. And they fall into one another's arms, weeping. Jackie's known about the affair. She banned Mary from the White House. It was the biggest betrayal for her because Mary was a friend of the family. She shouldn't be doing this. And Jackie says, we were so happy. Mary can't say anything. And Jackie says something in French, because I could do that, which she didn't say. And they part. And Mary says, I think I'll never see her again, which is, of course, true. But you don't have to be much of a writer to write that scene.
Yeah, but you can imagine what could have happened. And I think there was a lot of closed door in the closed city of Washington of what was going on, and everybody knew what was going on. But you can conjecture what happened between the lines.
Right. And the other thing is, I'm a screenwriter and a playwright. I see things as scenes, and I saw things as a journalist as scenes, because people like stories. No one remembers ideas, no one remembers arguments, but anecdotes are so memorable, stories. And I don't understand why more writers don't. I'm thrilled they don't. Let them, when I hear, fine writing, beautifully crafted, I think that's great. That makes my work easier.
Right.
Because what the audience wants, what readers want. I mean, I made a little video, right, to promote the book. It was 3 minutes and 13 seconds long. Every professional loved it. A friend of mine, who's a civilian, said, it's way too long. I cut a minute out of it. I listened to her.
2 minutes and 13 seconds, yeah. Instead of, these are long videos, the fact that people stay with us, it's a big deal, because most people don't.
Because there's protein in what you're doing, and you're not selling anything, right? You are offering,
or sharing, or like why. And I think it's giving people the chance to say why they've done certain things. And everything now is so quick that you don't really get the story. You get a sculpted story. And that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you as a journalist. Who was the actress who said you were the smart one? Which is, he's coming out to interview me. He was married to
No, I wasn't allowed to.
Oh, you weren't allowed to? Okay, no.
Sharon Stone.
No, it wasn't Sharon Stone.
She's too smart.
The one that was married to Antonio Banderas. Who was it?
Melanie Griffith?
Yes.
She was great.
Melanie Griffith said, good, I'm glad he's coming. He's the smart one. I loved that line. It's like, he's coming out to interview me. I want him.
Great. I mean, those were fun times. I mean, I did an entire interview with Richard Gere and never mentioned Cindy Crawford. And he thanked me at the end. I said, I completely forgot.
Right.
What we were talking about was interesting. And this, it seems to me, the point of what you're doing. All media now is so purposeful, right? And the purpose is to make the viewer a consumer. It's entirely about how many hits and how you can close the deal. This is just part of what you do, and so you're a little more high-minded about it. And also, this is like incredible and so crazy about you. You actually like books, and you like writers, and a lot of people I deal with in this business, the media business, they're not happy doing it.
Well, it's really funny because we shoot promo videos every week, and Austin's always teasing me, our producer, because I get everything wrong. I mean, if you ever publish the outtakes of these, you'd actually see, what I say, but nothing is on a monitor. I'm not reading off a monitor. And I watch a lot of people that they're talking about books, even on book segments on television shows, and they're reading off the monitor, and it's like, hi, we have so-and-so here, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this, more insight into why you did this and, why you were interested. And also, it works because it's tight and it's small. And I know that you don't like to write long. You feel like no book should be more than, 100 pages?
I say to publishers, give me your 400-page masterpiece, I'll give you a 300-page bestseller. Who's the rock and roll star? Lou Reed. Always leave them wanting less. They don't get it, right?
Right.
And
there's a lot that's written long, but here, it's interesting because I first read this, I just read it in manuscript. And as I was reading, I was like, these footnotes down on the bottom, is this going to work? And then I dropped into the zone of what you were doing, because you had the one story up here with the dialogue, and then down here was sort of all the attributions. And where this wasn't completely made up, folks. This was imagined, but there's a lot to go back and take a look at of what really happened that day, who was really at those dinners.
I mean, we've gotten almost to the end of this conversation. I've suddenly remembered, someone told me, this is how you should do it for Valentine's Day. You should do a special promotion. the greatest love story never told.
Oh,
and I
okay.
thought, very smart. I'm sure I'll forget to do it.
And here we are. Okay, it's the end of January. The book is just out. I think you've got time to do your Valentine's Day promotion. I think it's still
And
good.
so do you out there.
And so do you out there. This is
This
the
was
greatest
it.
one.
You
This-
got it.
This was the reason it's coming out this time of year, because it's for the Valentine's Day, right?
Oh, so
Couldn't
not.
be further from the truth.
So
Could not
not.
be further from the truth. So, did you spend a lot of time researching this book before you started writing?
Sure, no one loves to write. I mean, I love to write, and actually now that's a sickness that doing these promotional things are like, oh, I really want to write. This will be over soon. But this is actually the most important part. There's writing, and then there's being responsible for what you wrote. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're an artist, right? I'm a carpenter. I'm a blue-collar worker. We all are. And so the creativity begins after it comes out of the computer. It's like, how in this sea of stuff can you get anybody to care about what you do? And you and I have said this in public lots. We're not competing against other books. We're competing against everything.
Everything. Every bit of noise that's out there right now. I'm in a book group, and I have friends that I'll talk to about books, and they'll say, oh, so-and-so is my favorite writer. I'm like, oh, have you read the book that came out in September? Oh, he has a new book out? Oh, he has a new... So for all this thinking that with Instagram and Facebook and everything else that we're doing, that we're really penetrating and letting people know what's going on, we still have a huge disconnect. And that's what I'm trying to fix forge every week.
And there's also the problem of the news cycle. I mean,
Right.
I say jokingly, who's Taylor Swift?
Right.
Because that was a month ago. John F. Kennedy? I mean, he'd be 92 now. Mm-hmm. It's beyond a boomer thing. It's a geriatric thing to remember where you were.
And also what happened at Camelot when the Obamas came in to power. Mm-hmm. It was, we had the Reagan years, and we had something that would happen during those years, and then so we've had a lot that's happened since the Kennedys. And what is still the draw or appeal, and who's the age group with that draw or appeal towards? Who is it that's really looking? And is this something that's just iconic that people still want to know about? That's the big questions.
Well, yeah, those are the big questions, but not for me, because those readers are who they are, and we pitched all those websites, and we've aimed to 30 million Facebook views in a month. Okay, great, and they cost so little. Mm-hmm. So obviously, I mean, at Vanity Fair, I was read by lots of people. At the Times, I was read by lots of people. Now on the web, I mean, I have a devoted audience, but it is not gigantic.
To form audience like we did before is really difficult to do.
And so what I'd like to do is be bigger than the category. I'd like something to break out and actually be a thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. Be a conversation.
Exactly, for at least a minute in the news cycle. So yeah, I have reasonable ambitions for everything I do. One, because like everybody, I work really hard at it. And maybe I work a little harder because I read 150 books. I really like the research. I can't wait to start this novel now. And the table, which used to have all the Kennedy books, now has all the Dalai Lama books and all the Buddhism books. And they're all underlined. I can't wait to make the timeline of what I'm doing. And that's the fun part. But you want other people to get what writing is, a transfer of energy. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm really energetic when I do this stuff because I am heavily caffeinated.
And you're just going to sit there and tell that story.
Right.
You feel
I take
the story.
a legal drug, so I know what it's like to be out there. And so much of what's out there is really dull. Mm-hmm. And dull things are sad, or they're pre-programmed, or the next binge, and it's like millions of people get killed. And I'd like to do something. I'd like to do things that are different and good and easy to read. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Things that are good and yet accessible. That seems to be an important trick, and it takes us all the way back to John Grisham, who I had never read until we
you
did
were
that
sitting
thing.
there and reading, and it was like, I'm going to go read this book tonight.
This guy's not so bad.
Boy, I guess he's going to be a big success.
Yeah,
I guess he's
Tom
gonna
Cruise should make one of these movies.
Yeah, this should be a really, really good book, blah, blah, blah. I also do remember our Dalai Lama story that I hope does not make it into the book. We used to instant message each other a lot after Jesse went down to Washington. And at one point, he was interviewing the Dalai Lama in his office.
No,
and
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh. Oh, is that what it was? Thich Nhat Hanh?
More esoteric.
More esoteric. Okay, so he's interviewing in his office, and I am instant messaging him with some question about a deadline or something that we were working on. And he says, and what is a CKCF, which were my initials on AOL that were my call name? And Jesse's going, that is a person in New York, or you were describing, so it was really kind of funny too. I thought it was the Dalai Lama all this time.
Yeah, no, those interviews are amazing.
And it was interesting because we were also, it was not video. We were typing for people. So when we would interview somebody in the office, we would stay late because we'd have to hit the West Coast. So you'd go live on your imaginary stage, which was really just you typing someplace, which was even funnier in an auditorium somewhere. And we'd start typing for the authors. So you were really fast typists. I couldn't do this. I couldn't keep up with these people at all.
Fastest one-finger typist in America.
But we would be actually interviewing these people, but you would be trying to do what we're doing now, is get to the heart of what they're doing in a long interview that was typed. And we can still find these. We found the Grisham interview, and it was really amazingly fun to go back and see. We still had it.
Here's how primitive it was. I was at a camp resort in Virginia when Princess Diana was killed on a weekend. Raced back to AOL. The building's locked. It's also Labor Day weekend, so it's locked until Tuesday. Tuesday I get in and I say, we've got to build this thing. Well, there are procedures.
Right.
This has to go through this department. I said, excuse me, let me do this. And I built this thing, and instead of the fax, it was feel, grieve, share. It was a completely feminized thing.
Right.
It went up on Thursday. Now, it's almost a week after she died. There are then 3.5 million members, and there are 4 million messages on this thing by the time it's over. But if you can imagine now going to an online service office and knocking on the door and no one's there,
Right.
that could not even be.
No, something happens. I mean, it's also, we were really good about monitoring our boards, monitoring what was going on. And that's the reason I have so much trouble with a lot that's going on right now, because you have to be on top of your game. And you can't let falsehoods be getting out there. And you can't let misinformation be getting out there. And we were really, you couldn't just say something about an author that we just felt wasn't fair. We couldn't say you couldn't say something. But if it was just like something brutal, it wasn't going to stay up there for long. We felt very, very strongly about, I wouldn't say it was censoring. It was just, what do you want to do here?
Here's a tip for you, readers. I have unfriended many of my friends on Facebook. I'm much happier. I need to be on Facebook because I need those 5,000 friends, because the publishers say, do you have a platform? Yes, I have a platform. I do this.
Friends.
But my friends, some of them, my so-called friends, they're like gossiping over a clothesline without realizing that they are people of reputation, and other people take them seriously.
Yes.
And it's an invitation for me to snark, which is not my best feature. And so I'm just happier not seeing their stuff. And they don't know I've unfriended them.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because there are things that people say that they would never say to somebody in person. And I think that's what we were always looking for on message boards and in chat rooms and whatever is, would you say this to somebody flat out? Well, because I think it's I don't know.
It really comes down to this for me. And I think this is where you are too. It's a Bruce Springsteen line. All the hype in the world doesn't matter as much as one kid saying to another, man, you should have been there. So we're holding up books and saying, you should read this, right? This is actually good. And if you have credibility, and on Head Butler, over the years, I've built up some credibility, so people will buy and read stuff they never would have read before.
Right. And I think
And that is cool, because you're actually enlarging someone's world. And they write back and they suggest things to you that enlarge yours. It's a really nice conversation.
It's a going back and forth, and people say, oh, I went to see such and such an author, or I want to see so and so. And it's nice to hear that exchange because you can't be every place. So they might be at a book festival and they'll contribute a blog for us and they'll tell us what happened. Also, we don't do negative reviews, and we haven't done it right from the start. You and I talked about we didn't want to tell people what not to read. We just wanted to do it.
Don't give the crap any presence.
Yeah.
Don't help it with your negativity.
Right.
Pretend it never existed.
And I always felt that I didn't want to be the arbiter of taste. I didn't want to be the one that said, this is good. Because there were a lot of books that were very, very well reviewed last year and ended up on many best of lists that I just didn't enjoy. So what am I going to sit there and say, oh, this is the one?
At the end of the year on Head Butler, I say, oh, this was the list of the really best books. I read one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how many times have we said, have you read any of what's come out, whether it be a list of whatever?
But the thing is, you have to go with your personal interest. That's why they've come to you.
Right?
And
you may not agree. And look, I picked 52 books last year that I thought were bets on. At the end of the year, I could actually talk about all 52. I was kind of excited about that. Usually you don't remember. It's like everything becomes a fog.
Yeah, we're all hoping that Carol will sleep someday.
Yeah, right. Okay, we'll work on that. So what's next?
I have to finish the rewrite. I optioned a book called Bringing Home the Birkin.
Oh, okay.
About a guy, when you couldn't get Hermes Birkin bags, he found a way. And over the years, he bought $5 million worth and sold them for $10 million and had a lot of adventures with these women. And in the play, all that happens. But there's another arc, which is he's gay and living in Barcelona, and he's looking for real love.
Okay.
So I've gone now from Mary Meyer's a woman to I'm a gay guy in Barcelona. And then there's the novel about the next Dalai Lama, which I really shouldn't speak about.
Right.
But I get to be the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, so here we go.
Yeah, it's like, on the other hand...
But imagination is such a good thing.
On the other hand, as Fitzgerald says, that right at the start of Gatsby, the world is most successfully viewed through one window. Everybody who's got a lane has pretty much mastered that lane. You go to, say, Ken Auletta, who you want to talk about media. Mm-hmm. For me, every time is the first time, and it's just a big roll of the dice, and it's just the way I've done my whole life, and it's too late to change it now.
Too late to change it now. Well, I will say that I was reading this, I felt like I got to know Mary Meyer. I felt like I was doing a lot of looking up. Of course, you do that web crawl after you finish reading the book. But you feel like you were in this moment, and you were in this moment in history that I had not thought about before. And I had not thought about how this person was important.
Also, The Feminine Mystique came out in 1963. Feminism was just starting. Mm-hmm. And she was, as she says, the happiest day of my life was when my husband walked out that door for the last time. Mm. And she was an independent woman who had, I think, probably 2 affairs running at a time. And she was an artist who was working hard. She was actually inventing her own life in the middle of this very high-level social bubble. And I identified with her. Yeah. I felt Mary c'est moi.
And you think about how life is so different today. Like you sit there and say, these were the 60s, this is what was going on. It wasn't that long ago, and things were so dramatically different.
Yeah, I just wonder if you could kill someone in broad daylight in Georgetown now and get away with it.
No, because someone would have a camera.
Oh, that's
Someone
exactly,
would be taking a picture.
Exactly,
Somebody would be coming along the trail, and they'd make a video, and that's because that's what everything is today, is whatever happens, and it is, okay, and then we go back to, is that really the video of what you saw? The angle that it was taken at, was that the angle? And you and I have talked about a lot about the weaponizing of social media and what has happened today. And before, if this got out, this would not just be this would just have been in the gossip press, maybe a line. It would not have been every place, because everybody, how stories build and feed on each other right now.
But yet everyone in Washington talked about this thing incessantly because it said something very scary to them. One of Mary's best friends left Washington and never came back.
Because she saw what Washington really was behind the scenes.
No, she saw that you could get killed.
Yeah.
For what you thought and said.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
And, that happens in Russia all the time. Who knew it could happen here? But on the other hand, who knew you could assassinate a president? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we still conjecture that all this time. The Irishman looks at this. November Road by Lou Berney looked at it. So many different books recently. It's still one of those times that's in question. And it is, as a result, to have more questions going on is something that people still want to know about.
Yeah, that's why it was a relief to write this book, which took me away from all that and gave you a woman's life.
A woman's life. Well, thank you for joining me today. It has been such fun.
It's a pleasure.
Can you do another book so you can come back?
Yeah, I'll as fast as I can.
As fast as you can.
But, you know, the nice thing is, Carol and I communicate virtually most of the time.
Right.
We have phone calls and
Right.
texts. I haven't seen this woman in 20 years.
Seen a little bit more than that, but
That's
no, it's
not
true.
true. That's
We
not
actually
true.
do a lot more emailing than we do seeing each other. So it was lovely to have you here today.
And there are times we talk every day, and that's a good thing in my day.
Yeah.
Because I'm very attached to this enterprise. It's an important enterprise, much more important than maybe people in publishing really appreciate. And it's very important that it succeeds and grows.
Well, it's really interesting because we've been doing it for 23 years and almost 24. It'll be 24 this year. And the fact that we were there when nobody was doing this, and everybody says what they're doing now, and I'm like, well, you should have been there in the olden days, you know, because it was building something completely different. You look at the books behind you. At the beginning, when we started, well, first of all, there was no internet. So if we wanted to get books from publishers, we had to fax or call. We had to fax the reviews back to everybody. Almost no publisher had email. So think about where
here's
we were.
the final thing, which is the businesses we were in are now almost extinct as we knew them.
Yes.
And if to be anything close to our age and wanting to start something and reinvent our lives, disaster. We saw the future accidentally and got out early.
Yes, exactly.
And have had these lovely lives.
Yeah, we've had these great lives, and it was something different because I didn't have to go down with the ship. I didn't have to sit there and say, oh, this is not working. I kind of walked out the door. It was funny because I walked out the door, Connie and Assis, they were starting Epicurious. And I realized, I remember what I was up looking at the prototype of, and I was like, this is a really cool thing. And I said, you know, there's a problem though, because nobody wants to read advertising online. Nobody wants advertising. All they want is the content. And that was a huge red flag, even back then, because everybody just wanted everything for free. And it was the start. I remember sitting in the office looking at those screens. But I also do remember I was working at Mademoiselle magazine, walking out the door saying you should take this thing online because it's the right age group for what's going to go. But we were at the time, it's like everybody loved AOL, and then the kids migrated over to Earthlink, and that was sort of the undoing. Because where the kids went was where all the energy was going in the room. And it was a magical moment. So with that, thanks for joining me right quickly.
These are much more magical moments, actually. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.